Welcome, tribe. It is Tuesday morning. It's the start of a new program phase. We're doing our first strength program microcycle for 2019. Very exciting. It's easier training for us, at least, and for the tribe and you guys out there. Today we're answering some pretty good questions that have come in from our Movement Mastermind online coaching community. In regards to the concept of whether they should continue stretching if they're feeling sore in their muscles. A few people believe that they may have strained areas of their body, and they want to know whether they should continue on with the mobility program. So today we're going to really dive deep into that, and we're going to talk about all the different modalities of tissue soreness or muscle soreness post-exercise, and we're going to talk about how Rad and I and Richie basically work around them or rehab them or overcome them. All that and more coming up right after this. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. We're back, and of course, if you haven't met us before, my name is Yanni Burmeister. I am co-founder with Rad and Richard to the Foundation Movement System and Unity Gym, where we teach you how to move and nourish instead of just diet and exercise. Now, to my right is my brother Rad. How you doing today?
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And behind the camera, producing the show, is Richard, who you can't see, and eventually we will get a camera so you can see him just to piss him off.
Good evening to Lars. Lars has said good evening wherever you are in the world, because it's actually morning over here in Australia, Lars. But
yeah,
good evening to you.
That's right, absolutely. Tell us where you are in the world, Lars, and where you're watching from. So, big topic today, and super important as well. This is one of those things that a lot of people get really wrong, and it can really stifle your progress, not understanding the differentiation between different types of soreness in the muscle tissue. And there are, for today's show, we have to remind you guys that we are certainly not physical therapists or physiotherapists. We're personal trainers, so we are limited to our knowledge and understanding of these issues. So please, if you want to learn a lot more about injury management, I would align yourself with a really, really good physiotherapist or physical therapist. We had one on the show yesterday, Tom Cartwright, which was fantastic. We can always take this to a higher level by getting people on the show as well if you guys have more questions. But just to quickly dive in, we want to first differentiate the different types of pain that you experience in your muscles after exercise, post-exercise. The first one and the most common one is delayed onset muscle soreness, or the acronym for that is DOMS. DOMS is usually, it used to be thought that it was caused by a buildup of lactic acid in the body, but we now pretty much know, although there's still a lot of research and we're still a little bit unsure of the exact mechanism of delayed onset muscle soreness, we're pretty sure that it's not lactic acid, because they were able to we test blood serum with athletes, and lactic acid's pretty much gone after a few hours of exercise, and it's not around anymore the day or two after when you most feel DOMS. And there's also what we do know about DOMS is that because it's not around after concentric only contraction, which is where you move the body into a muscle into a shortened contraction, we sort of believe now that it's mostly due to eccentric, where we elongate the tendon contraction. So we're going to stick to that theory today. When we talk about DOMS, we're talking about the pain that you experience after eccentric loading, which for a hypertrophy program is very common. We want to slow down the eccentric contraction, put the muscle under tension for as long as possible, cause as much delayed onset muscle soreness and stuff as possible. Now, it's caused by micro tears to the muscle fiber, pretty much, and that's it's fairly easily treated. Rad and I, well, actually, let's just continue with the distinctions first. The second one is tendonitis. Tendon sprain, or some people call it a strain. Tendon sprain is the one that we're probably we see most around the gym, because it's caused by an initial trauma, and it's usually one instance where you stretch the muscle body too far, too quickly without warming up, or God forbid you tear it, and it can be quite a severe tear or it can be a small tear. After that, we have tendonitis. Oh, I've got a really itchy nose. I apologise. I'm going to keep touching my face. You just can't pick it, can you? Tendonitis is basically an overuse injury, and it can be caused by an abusive load that happens once or on multiple instances. Tendonitis is treatable fairly easily, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And then finally, to the very end of the spectrum, we have tendinopathy or tendinosis. And tendinosis and tendinopathy is completely different to all of the previously mentioned, because it's when the body is abused to such a degree that the tissue degenerates, and it takes a long time to repair, and it requires a very different strategy than most of the others. So we've all, myself, Rad and Richard, have all experienced every one of these. DOMS a lot. And also we've all torn muscles at times, and we've also experienced tendonitis, and we've also experienced tendinosis or tendinopathy. And I can assure you that it's something that you want to catch early when you're at that tendonitis stage, because once you experience tendinosis, it is a painful and slow process to heal the body once the tissue has sort of degenerated, because you effectively have to regenerate the tissue and rebuild the integrity of the tissue. Now, first up, let's talk about some strategies with delayed onset muscle soreness. So obviously there's the foam rolling and massage. How do you treat delayed onset muscle soreness?
Just a teaspoon of concrete and a glass of
I knew he was going to say that. I knew he was. I could see the look in his eyes. He was just waiting to throw it out there.
Yeah, a teaspoon of concrete will fix most DOMS, in my opinion. No, honestly, I don't do anything to treat DOMS. I just deal with it.
Yeah.
Interestingly,
though, Rad and I have discussed this a lot, and we've discussed it with our tribe. We DOMS can really stifle progress, because if you push really hard, and this is common in bodybuilding and why they do different splits, they smash the shoulders on one day, then they smash the quads on the next day, and then because they train so hard that you can't train the other muscle, nor should you, for the next 72 hours. We have adopted a different strategy over the last couple of years. And, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, the way that we do it is through smart programming. So which is, if you read the majority of the literature that we read and that keeps coming up, it's widely accepted that when you train a muscle group or a specific muscle, that it will take up to 48 to 72 hours for it to fully recover and be ready to train again. This is if you don't injure yourself. So 72 hours is 3 days if you go to the end of that spectrum. So the way that we write our program is we do bent arm strength on Monday and Thursday, lower body on Tuesday and Friday, and then straight arm strength on Wednesday and Saturday. So we're intentionally writing a program that gives that allows that 72-hour window of recovery before we start training the same muscle group again, and that works really well. Then we give enough volume on the muscles and on the movements, and we repeat the same movements twice a week so that we're getting a lot of volume on those areas, and we're seeing great results with minimizing the pain and discomfort from DOMS. And then beyond that, for me personally, what do? I listen to my body. If because I'm not training the same muscle group for another couple of days, it's more just about stretching those same muscles. And if I go to stretch and they feel really sore, I just take it really easy on it. And to be honest, that's all I really do. I mean, when I can be bothered, I'll go and buy some magnesium and I'll have that daily, but then I don't buy it for months, and then someone will remind me to get magnesium, and I get it, and I guess that helps.
Yeah, well, that's my next key strategy. So the most common, and the one that Rad hasn't talked about.
Well, hang on, I haven't finished. Is sleep. So I sleep for me is sacred. And I'm lucky to get 6.5 hours sleep a night. because I've got children and I travel so far for work, but I go to sleep early every single night, and I eat really good food.
Yeah, that's a big one, and that's what we'll talk about, because you can actually
and I have
control
protein supplements a couple of times a day.
Okay, so my key strategy to mitigating DOMS, first and foremost, is warming up before exercise is like the number one gold standard. If you're not warming up properly, and we did a whole show on this the other day about correct warm-up, and we're actually putting together a whole program on correct warm-up. Warm-up is by far, if you put research into it, it's the best way to mitigate DOMS. Second to that is nutrition, and you can have anti-inflammatory foods. Most of them are vegetables, but you can find, if you ask Dr. Google, it'll give you a great list of anti-inflammatory foods. We supplement vital greens, spirulina, or wheatgrass powder in our smoothies, which is a mix of all of the vegetables and with phytonutrients that help to reduce inflammation. Rad tipped on it there. Magnesium is very, very effective for mitigating DOMS, whether you take it orally, which we do, or you soak in it in a tub of Epsom salts, like a bath of Epsom salts. That's really, really effective. And the last one, which we do that he didn't really talk about much, is massage, self-myofascial release, and also like foam rolling, massage balls. And I've linked a bunch of them in the video description today that we use. We love the rumble rollers and the massage balls. Now we to some degree mitigate DOMS on autopilot because we've built it into our program.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. I didn't actually realise how much all that stuff that we do that does mitigate DOMS. But yeah, that's what we do every day, and that's just a part of my life. So I was thinking, what do I do specifically? But I guess we've kind of built our whole program and our whole life around mitigating DOMS. Because I remember when we didn't do this stuff, I was in pain all the time.
All the time, yeah. And this is the thing, like, we're so far disconnected from it because we've built our whole program and tailored our workouts around reducing and mitigating DOMS. Because the reality is, if you're experiencing a lot of DOMS, I believe you're doing it wrong, because you can't train to a high enough intensity every day to continue progressing. And it comes down to the argument of, should I be training at 100% or should I train at 70%, but continue to be able to train at 70% every day? The guy who trains 5 to 7 days a week will beat the guy who trains 2 to 4 every day of the week. Every day of the week. When you take those two individuals, and at the end of the year, the one who's trained 6 to 7 days a week will be so far ahead of the one who's trained 2 to 4 days a week, even though the one that trains 2 to 4 days trains to 100% every time. And the guy who does 60 to 70%, 6 to 7 days a week, he will out-train you every day of the week. So you've got to take that into consideration. You've got to make sure that you've got those strategies in place that we spoke about earlier.
Lars has got a question here. So he's saying, Lars is saying, as far as I know, stretching doesn't alleviate DOMS. What's your guys' opinion on that? Our opinion is that you're right. It doesn't really alleviate DOMS. But
it's a tool in a big toolbox.
But things like foam rolling and Epsom salts baths and magnesium supplements will help to alleviate DOMS. DOMS is micro tears in the muscle, and stretching opens the DOMS up again if you stretch too hard. So you have to be careful with it. We've created a really good balance between managing our DOMS, and also we don't, the way that we train, just like what Yanni said, by training to about 70% of our maximum capacity, we don't get as bad DOMS as the guys that smash themselves in the gym every day that they do it. So it works well for us. And
keeping in mind that DOMS is predominantly caused by eccentric contraction only. So, if you're doing high explosive work, you generally won't experience that amount of DOMS.
And Lars is, so we'll just get his last question. He's saying also, there is no correlation between DOMS and protein synthesis in the muscle as far as I know. Leave that one to Yanni. If you do a little bit of research around DOMS, one of the things that they say that we sort of alluded to before is that taking a good protein supplement does help. The reason why it helps, Lars, is because it helps to rebuild the tissue much faster. If you've got an abundance of protein, irrespective of whether it's a supplement or through nutrition,
it's going to help the recovery process because the protein is required to rebuild the cells and initiate muscle protein synthesis. So I'm a firm believer, from what I've read and what I've studied, that supplementing protein and eating good quality, highly bioavailable protein is definitely one of those key factors that help to mitigate delayed onset muscle soreness, and it's something that I forgot to mention before. Let's move on quickly because I want to get on to tendonitis because this is where it gets really interesting and really important. Sorry. We'll talk about strains first. Commonly also referred to as a sprain. I don't know why. If you look it up, it's where the muscle is twisted or stretched too far or torn. I don't really know how you twist a muscle because there's an insertion, an origin and an insertion, and most of the time that would mean that you've basically destroyed an entire bone structure because the muscle body lays on a bone structure, but I'll go with it anyway. Strain is very, very common, and there can be, obviously, there's like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 strains or tears. The general rule with a strain or tear is that rest, like the whole rice thing is best. Rest, ice, elevation, and compression is the best way to heal it. It usually takes anywhere from, like on an average person, 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. On someone who's got really good strategies in place, 1 to 2 weeks, I reckon, is fairly realistic in repairing a strain. You absolutely shouldn't stretch a strained muscle because a strained muscle, like Rad said, it's a tear in the fibers, and stretching it will only open it up. You can do isometric contractions. You can do very gentle contraction work to get blood flowing and things like that, but it's very dependent on where the tear is in the body because different areas of the body get different amounts of blood flow. So the recovery process can be quick or a little bit more delayed. But think about a strain like a cut on the surface of the skin. If what you want the cut to do is close up. You sometimes need a Band-Aid or a plaster or a stitch in order to speed that healing process up. A strain is like that on the inside where you can't see it. So,
if you keep stretching it and pulling it open, then it just stays damaged.
Exactly. And and a lot of exercises will just continue to do that because you're taking it through its full range of movement. So when you get a strain, it is important to rest it for a period of time.
We're running out of time, so let's get on to tendonitis.
Tendonitis is basically it's inflammation of the tendon, and let's just quickly distinguish the difference between tendon and muscle. The muscle is the area of the body that creates the contraction. The tendon is what joins that muscle to the bone. So tendonitis is occurring in the tendon, in the area that joins. And it is inflammation of the tendon, and it requires a strategy of anti-inflammatory. So anti-inflammatory medications work really well, ice works really well, and rest as well. It's super important to understand that tendonitis can occur from both one instance or multiple instances, but it's most commonly caused by just repeating, like bad programming, bad periodization, poor strategies in the gym. But it also can be, it can occur from one instance where you've got a dysfunction. Like very commonly, tendonitis can occur in the forearms and elbows if you've got a dysfunction in the shoulder. So you want to be looking, if you're getting tendonitis a lot, you want to be looking at your body from a macro standpoint, how all the joints are functioning, what's your mobility like. Very common causes of tendonitis are poor mobility, poor end range strength, and when you try to push into those ranges over and over and over again, there are areas of the body that overwork, that aren't happy with you, and they become inflamed, uncomfortable, and then can develop into quite a lot of pain. Going from tendonitis to the next level, which is tendinosis, or we refer to it as tendinopathy. Tendinopathy is when you've basically abused tendonitis. You've completely ignored it, you've continued to train, and the tissue quality degenerates. And it can be a really big problem. Richard, Rad, and myself have all suffered tendinopathy in our forearms, in our elbows. I've suffered it in my rotator cuff, in my shoulder before. And the reality is that you have to completely change the way you train when you experience tendinopathy or tendinosis, because you can't rest. Resting, the tissue continues to degenerate, but you can't stimulate it too much because you make it worse. So what you have to do is kind of go back to the drawing board, identify the area that has tendinopathy, tendinosis, and then you've got to contract or stimulate the area enough to remodel the tissue, but not enough to cause it to continue to degenerate. And have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've made so much. I fucking hate tendonitis. It's been the bane of my existence for the last 3 or 4 years. You know, this pursuit of calisthenics and gymnastics, like your forearms just get so hammered, and not understanding it in a way was a blessing in disguise, because it forced us to become experts on it. I didn't know anything about tendonitis or tendinopathy before I got it, and since I got it, I've really had to delve deep into understanding how to do it. And it's still our most popular video on YouTube is, you know, how to deal with golfer's elbow. And since fixing golfer's elbow, we all got tennis elbow. So golfer's elbow is the medial epicondylitis, so it's in the tendons that cause flexion in the forearm, whereas tennis elbow is on the lateral, and it's actually more so muscles to do with the control elbow flexion rather than wrist extension. So to add on to what Yanni said, I would add to say that when you identify that you've got tendonitis, you immediately have to stop doing the activities that cause it. So that means if you've got tendonitis in the forearms, what it can mean is you can't do the grips of certain exercises that you want to do. Like for example, with tennis elbow, you can't really do a neutral grip. And if you do neutral grip pull-ups, it really aggravates it. Or neutral grip, any kind of elbow flexion, you'll really feel that it aggravates it. So you have to go to supinated and pronated grips. And if you can do those without pain, without causing it, then you can continue to do that. So that's the first thing. Identify the things that cause the pain and stop them. And that's one of the hardest things. I'm going to sit on this for a minute, because you need to, in my opinion, I reckon, like what I would add to this, what's the number one thing? You have to recognize in your heart and soul right now, you have an injury that if you don't do the right things, the next 5 years of your training is going to be severely hampered by this.
We have a running joke at Unity Gym that tendinopathy is gym herpes. Once you get it, it's almost impossible to get rid of it, and you deal with it to some degree for the rest of your training age, really. Like just quickly before you dive, because I know where you're going into the mindset, and it's definitely worth noting. The very easy way to distinguish whether you've got tendonitis, which is the first event, or tendinosis, which is the really serious event of the degeneration of tissue. Tendonitis, once your body warms up, will generally go away. So it's when you first go to do a bicep curl or a pull-up and you get a pinching or a sharp feeling in the tendon or the muscle, usually around the attachment of the muscle. And then you warm up and you go, oh, it's gone away, it's okay. That's the warning signal, because that's tendonitis. Tendinopathy or tendinosis the pain doesn't go away. It's a dull ache constantly, and it gets much worse when you start to push it. You know, so if you're experiencing that initial pinch, like, oh geez, you know, there's something going on in there, and then you continue to warm up and just ignore it and it goes away, don't think that it's okay to keep pushing through.
That means you still need to stop doing those exercises that cause you pain, and you need to deal with it as though it's inflammation.
Yeah.
So you need to, we could do a whole show on inflammation. So,
yeah, that's exactly right. Just remember, guys, that tendonitis turns into tendinopathy if it's ignored or neglected. It needs treatment, and usually treatment requires not doing the thing that causes it at all and resting. And there's so many other areas of the body that you can work, and that's one of the really great things about learning calisthenics and mobility is that there's always something you can do.
I reckon because we've got a couple of amazing videos on this, and we've only got a few more minutes on the show. If you want to know more about this, just check out our videos on golfer's elbow and tennis elbow. There's a series of them there, and they're really, really good.
Just know that the first one we did was one of the first videos we ever did, and it was filmed on an iPhone, and it's the quality is terrible when you watch it.
Terrible, but the content's great, and it'll really help you. But The strategy, in my honest opinion, is when you recognize that you've got it, you have to accept that you're going to change everything. Because we've all got these goals, right? Like you're working on a handstand push-up, or you're working on a chest to bar pull-up, or you're working on muscle-ups, or whatever it is. I mean, I've just talked about upper body goals, of course, and then you've got tendonitis, and you start thinking, oh man, I can't keep working on my goal. Yeah, you can't.
You got to reevaluate.
You've got to reevaluate what your goals are, and if you don't, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse, and your life is going to turn shit. And don't make the mistake that we made of just going, oh fuck it, I'm just going to keep going, because I got tendonitis, didn't listen to it, then got tendinopathy, and then was forced. And then when I was forced to, I was okay with it. I understood, okay, well, this is what I've got, and I shifted my goals to other things and made progression in other areas. But yeah, don't
the first time I got tendonitis, and then which I ignored, and 3 or 4 months later it turned into severe tendinopathy. I couldn't do anything with my elbows for 8 months.
Yeah, I was the same.
Properly.
I was the same.
So I couldn't do pull-ups. I couldn't do any bicep or tricep exercises. I couldn't do anything.
I was exactly the same for 8 months. I had to focus on only straight arm strength, and I was working on a one-arm pull-up, and I had to completely stop my progression, and all I could do was, straight arm movements.
Scapula,
like
yeah. So, yeah, guys, as Rad said, we got some great resources for overcoming these issues. For the guys on the Movement Mastermind who have what sounds like that you've strained muscles, a couple in the groin. I wanted to actually give them a shout out for asking the questions.
Just a couple in the groin. I had more strains when I decided that I was going to get flexible than I've ever had in my life. And when you get a strain from stretching, the short answer is yes, you've overstretched, and you cannot stretch that same muscle for between 1 and 3 weeks, depending on how bad the strain is. In my opinion, when you try to stretch and then you feel that pain's still there, you've got to stop, and you need to go a few days up to a week without feeling pain before you start stretching that muscle again.
Because if you stretch it again, that's how you start to develop tendonitis and tendinopathy.
Yeah.
So when you continually repeat hurting that, abusing that tendon, it's from an abusive load, which usually happens over multiple instances, you're going to cause a bigger problem down the track. Okay, guys? Hopefully we've cleared up the differences between DOMS, sprains, strains, tendonitis, and tendinosis. If you have questions, as usual, throw them in the comments. I know Lars has dived in there.
Lars is saying 2 years of golfer's elbow here. Fucking hate it. Love your video on rehab. Thanks, bro. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, brother.
Thanks for the input on the show, man. We're here to help you guys, so if anyone wants to jump on and ask us on these daily shows,
absolutely.
Any questions, we'll be there.
Before we go, I just want to do something on this camera, because I know that I haven't done anything. So hello, everyone. This is the serious face. We need to use these cameras a lot more. Anyway, until next time, have a fantastic day. Have you got anything else to add?
No.
Here's to the strength training week, guys, the microcycle. Looking forward to next week. It's deload week, baby. Massages, Epsom salts baths, lots and lots of healthy anti-inflammatory food. If you're on the Movement Mastermind, make sure you catch me on the AMA on Friday. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow morning on the show. Take care. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.